What started as just another Wednesday evening quickly turned into something I wasn't expecting. I came home from work, feeling the usual tiredness, ready to relax with my wife, Angela. But as soon as I walked into the living room, I knew something was off. Angela was sitting on the couch, her hands neatly folded in her lap, and a manila envelope placed carefully next to her. Her voice was flat as she said, "We need to talk." I sat down across from her, already feeling that something serious was about to happen. "What's going on?" I asked. Without saying a word, she slid the envelope across the table to me. Inside were divorce papers. There was no build-up, no explanation, just straight to the point. The divorce papers hit me harder than I thought they would, but not in the way most would expect. The truth was, our relationship had slowly fallen apart a long time ago. Angela wasn't really a partner anymore. She'd become more like a critical roommate. There was no kindness left in our home. I'd always had a feeling she might be seeing someone else, although I could never prove it. But as I looked at those papers, I didn't feel sad or angry. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. "All right," I said, staying calm. Her eyes widened. "All right?" she repeated, surprised. "Yeah," I shrugged. "If that's what you want." Angela's face stiffened. It was clear she expected me to beg, get angry, or try to change her mind. But instead, I just leaned back on the couch and let out a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. She pressed her lips tightly together. "Well, I guess that was easier than I thought." Without another word, she grabbed her purse and started heading for the door. That's when I noticed how much effort she'd put into her appearance. Her hair perfectly done, makeup flawless, and she was wearing a dress I hadn't seen in ages. "Going out?" I asked with a half smile. She paused for a second, then rolled her eyes. "Not that it's any of your business, but yes." And I actually laughed. There was something almost funny about the whole situation. She seemed to think she was delivering some big blow, as if she was the prize I should be devastated to lose. But I wasn't. "Have a good time," I said as I walked toward the kitchen. "No need to wait up." She huffed as she left, but I could tell she was a bit unsettled. I wasn't acting how she thought I would, and that was just the beginning of her confusion. In the days that followed, Angela acted as though she had won. She hardly came home, likely staying with the man she'd left me for. But I didn't care. My life seemed brighter than it had in a long time. I started going to the gym, eating healthier, and reconnecting with old friends. The stress I'd been carrying for so long was gone. But then, things began to change. It started with little things. Angela would stop by the house sometimes, looking around like she expected to see chaos or some sign that I was falling apart emotionally. But everything was neat and organized. I was doing well, even thriving. There were no signs of her left behind. That's when I saw it, doubt creeping into her eyes for the first time. She had convinced herself she was making a better choice, thinking she'd leave me feeling regretful while she moved on to something better. But things don't always go as planned. What happens when the safety net you expected doesn't catch you? In the first few days after she left, Angela stayed away, and I didn't hear much from her. Her absence didn't bother me at all. I was actually doing better than I had in years. I no longer had to walk on eggshells around her moods or fake conversations with someone who had emotionally checked out long ago. I finally had the space to focus on myself. I started my days with a workout and cooked real meals at night: steak, roasted vegetables, salmon, things Angela used to complain about but never helped make. For the first time in a long while, I slept soundly. It was clear how much of a weight I had been carrying without realizing it. But Angela's behavior began to shift. At first, it was small. She'd stop by to grab something, but would stay longer than expected. One evening, she walked into the kitchen while I was eating and just stood there, watching me before speaking. "You're cooking?" she asked, sounding surprised. I looked at my plate, then at her. "Yeah," she scoffed, shaking her head. "Since when?" "You've always hated cooking." I gave a small smile. I didn't hate cooking. I hated doing it while being constantly criticized by someone who made me feel like I could never get anything right. Her body stiffened, and I could see a flash of annoyance in her eyes. She wasn't used to hearing me talk like that, but there was no reason to hold back anymore. She had made her choice. "Whatever," she muttered, grabbing her things and leaving again. But I could tell something was bothering her. I wasn't reacting how she thought I would. There were no emotional breakdowns, no desperate phone calls or texts begging for another chance. I didn't sit around moping or drowning myself in alcohol. In her mind, I was supposed to be heartbroken while she moved on, but instead, I was doing better than ever, and that unsettled her. After about a week, things started to get even more strange. One evening, she called me out of the blue. Her voice was casual, like nothing had changed. "Hey," she said, sounding light. "Just checking in. How have you been?" I almost laughed at the ridiculousness of it. Since when did she care about how I was doing? "I'm good," I replied. "Actually, I'm doing great." There was silence on the other end. An awkward pause. Then she cleared her throat. "Oh, well, that's good," she said, sounding less than thrilled. It was clear she had been hoping for a different answer. I decided to turn the question back on her. "And you? How's everything going?" There was a pause. "Yeah, things are okay," she said, but I could tell from her tone she wasn't being truthful. She wasn't being honest. I didn't press her for more, but I had a strong feeling she was still with the guy she'd likely left me for. Maybe, though, the fantasy was starting to fade. Maybe he wasn't as perfect as she imagined. Maybe the reality of being single in her mid-30s wasn't as glamorous as she thought it would be. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. "Glad to hear it," I said. "Anyway, I've got plans, so I need to head out." That wasn't true. I didn't have any plans, but I wanted to end the conversation before she tried to dig deeper. She hesitated, as if she had more to say, but just let out a reluctant, "Oh, okay. Talk later," she said. Talk later. I thought. That wasn't going to happen. That moment marked the first crack in her dream life, and over the next few days, her behavior only confirmed it. Angela started stopping by the house more often. At first, she said she was just picking up a few things she'd forgotten, but soon she started hanging around. One evening, around 10, she showed up saying she needed a pair of shoes, but instead of leaving right away, she sat down on the couch, watching me like she was waiting for something. I didn't give her anything. Another time, she walked in during a call with a friend and stayed nearby, obviously trying to overhear. I made a point of laughing and talking about how great I was feeling lately. She didn't like that at all. With each step I took toward confidence, she seemed more and more uneasy. Regret was written all over her face, though she refused to admit it. Her pride got in the way of any apology. That's when it hit me, she thought she still had control. She probably thought she could walk away, enjoy her freedom, and come back whenever she wanted. But she was completely wrong. For years, Angela had been in charge. She always knew how to twist things to her advantage, making sure it looked like she was the one in control. I played along for the sake of peace, always adjusting to her moods and trying not to upset her. But now, with nothing left to lose, I stopped following her script. That's when she started unraveling. Her visits became more frequent, and each time, she had a flimsy excuse. Once it was some mail she'd forgotten, another time it was her favorite shampoo. But it was clear to me she wasn't coming to get her things. She was coming to check on me, to see how I was handling life without her. And the answer? Exceptionally well. I made sure everything looked perfect. The house was spotless, something she never believed I could do on my own. The fridge was full of fresh food. A gym bag sat by the door, showing I was taking care of myself. I even put a self-help book on the coffee table, something she would have never expected me to read. Every little detail, every small change was sending her a quiet message. I was doing just fine on my own, and it was driving her crazy. One night, she showed up while I was watching TV. She stood silently in the doorway, arms crossed, staring at me like I had done something wrong. Without much interest, I glanced at her and asked, "What's up?" She let out a big sigh. "Can we talk?" That was unexpected. Angela never asked to talk. She gave orders. She lectured. She controlled. I muted the TV and turned to face her. "Sure," I said. There was a hesitation. For the first time, I saw something unfamiliar in her expression, uncertainty. I don't understand," she finally said. I raised an eyebrow. "Don't understand what?" She gestured vaguely at me. "This. You're acting like you're totally unaffected. Like none of this bothers you." I shrugged. "That's because it doesn't." Her lips tightened into a thin line. She was waiting for something to break in me. She wanted to see some pain. A sign of the heartbreak she thought I'd be feeling. But there were no hidden signs of inner turmoil. Truth is, I was in the best emotional place I'd been in years. When she softly commented, almost surprised, that I didn't seem upset, I couldn't help but laugh. A real, genuine laugh. "Angela, why would I be sad? You asked for the divorce. You got what you wanted. What's there for me to be miserable about?" I said it without any sarcasm. Her expression changed right then. I saw a flicker of uncertainty, maybe even fear. This wasn't what she'd imagined. She had pictured a scene where I would beg her to come back. where she would be in control. But that whole narrative had fallen apart. Instead of facing a broken man, she was looking at someone calm, content, maybe even thriving. And for the first time, I think she realized she might have made the wrong decision. As her illusions started to break down, reality began to set in. Angela wasn't naive. She knew what she had done. Leaving was a calculated risk. She thought she was trading up, believing her new partner would fill a void, offer some spark she felt was missing. But I could already sense things weren't going smoothly. The facade was starting to crack. One night, the truth slipped out. She said, "You don't even care that I'm moving on." And I noticed it immediately. I'm moving on. Not, I moved on. The present tense said everything. It meant her new life wasn't turning out the way she hoped. I leaned back on the couch, half smiling. "Angela, your life choices aren't my concern anymore." She recoiled, literally flinched at my words. That single moment shifted the power. I finally had control, and I wasn't about to give it up. It became more obvious by the day that her dream life was falling apart. At first, the signs were small. She started coming by more often, staying longer each time, asking questions that didn't really concern her. But then, it got clearer. She started making up reasons to stay longer. One evening, she showed up claiming she needed a work document she had forgotten. I didn't press her. I let her search through her old desk. But instead of grabbing what she needed and leaving, she just stood there, flipping through papers that didn't matter, clearly stalling. I could feel her eyes on me, but I didn't give her any attention. Then came the visit that shattered all pretense. It was nearly 11 at night when she knocked. I was surprised she had the nerve to show up that late. I opened the door, leaning against the frame. "Something wrong?" I asked. She hesitated, letting out a dramatic sigh. "Can I come in?" I didn't need to ask why. I already knew. Her carefully built fantasy had fallen apart. I stepped aside without saying anything, watching as she sat on the couch like she still belonged there. I took a seat across from her, waiting for her to speak. It didn't take long before she broke the silence. "So, you're really okay with all of this?" Her voice was softer now, almost hesitant. I shrugged casually. Why wouldn't I be? She shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't about curiosity, it was a test. She wanted to see if she still had any influence over me. But I wasn't playing that game. Eventually, she eased into the real question she was dying to ask. "So, are you seeing anyone?" There it was. Classic Angela. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. She was spiraling, desperate to know if I had moved on before her. I leaned back, a small grin on my face. "Why do you ask?" She blinked, flustered. "Just wondering, I guess." Wondering? No, she was hoping. She needed to know if there was any chance I was still emotionally available, in case her own rebound was falling apart. I didn't push her for more. I already knew. Angela had never been good at hiding her emotions. The silence stretched for a few moments before she finally blurted it out. I'm not sure I made the right decision." I kept my face neutral, but inside, I was grinning. "Oh," I said, pretending to be surprised. She sighed deeply and ran a hand through her hair, clearly distressed. "I just thought things would turn out differently." That was her confession. So I gently nudged. "Different how?" She avoided looking at me, fidgeting slightly. "I guess I thought maybe I just needed something new. A clean slate. But it's not." She trailed off and stopped herself. She couldn't say it out loud. She didn't want to admit that the man she left me for wasn't the dream she had imagined. That her so-called upgrade wasn't an upgrade at all. That the grass on the other side wasn't any greener. I let the silence stretch, letting her words hang in the air. Then I stood up and said plainly, "Well, Angela, that's not really my concern anymore, is it?" She looked stunned. Her mouth opened and closed again, speechless. This version of me was foreign to her. She was used to the man who always bent over backward, who sacrificed for the sake of peace. That person was gone. She was just starting to understand that. For years, Angela had thought she was in control, believing I would always be there, waiting for her to come back. She thought she could leave, start fresh, and I'd be left broken. But life had a way of exposing the truth, and the reality was harsher than her illusions. After that evening, when she practically confessed her dissatisfaction with the new life she had chosen, I thought she would retreat. Whether it was pride or embarrassment, I figured she would stay away. But I was wrong. She started showing up more often, not just to pick up her things, but for reasons she never fully explained. One Friday night, not long after I had returned from the gym and was still feeling the rush of a good workout, I heard a knock at the door. It was 9:45, a bit late for casual drop-ins. Before I even reached the door, I knew it had to be her. And when I opened it, there she stood, Angela. She looked like she'd been through a storm. Her hair was wild, as if she'd been pulling at it in frustration, and her face was full of regret, confusion, and something that looked a lot like panic. I leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed. She shifted her weight uncomfortably. "Can I come in?" she asked. Part of me wanted to turn her away, but curiosity got the better of me. This wasn't the confident woman who once thought she was the prize. No, this was someone who had just realized too late that she'd lost the game she started. I stepped aside, letting her pass. She walked in without saying a word and didn't even bother to sit down, just stood there looking lost. I didn't rush her. I let the silence stretch, making her sit in the discomfort of her own choices. Finally, she exhaled sharply and turned to me. "I need to talk to you," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "About?" She swallowed hard. "Everything." There was no more pretending now. Whatever had happened in her new life had finally stripped away the arrogance she'd carried for so long. I nodded toward the couch. "Go ahead." She hesitated but eventually sat down, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. "I thought leaving was the right thing to do," she began. "Honestly, I believed I needed something new. Something different." I said nothing, just kept watching her. She took a deep breath before continuing. But I was wrong. The fragile layer finally cracked. I leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "What changed?" A humorless chuckle escaped her lips. "Do you really want to know?" I shrugged lightly. "Why not?" Then she unraveled. "I thought he was someone new. Someone who would treat me better," she said, her voice faltering as she lowered her gaze. "But I was so naive. I thought he genuinely cared. Turns out, I was just another option for him. That was it." I didn't say a word, just let her speak. "At first, he was exciting," she went on, her voice trembling. "He made me feel alive, like I was doing something spontaneous. But little by little, I started to see who he really was." She scoffed bitterly. "I wasn't special. I was just another face in the crowd to him. And the second I tried to talk seriously about where we were going, he shut it down. Told me he was never looking for anything permanent." I held back a smile. Angela, the one who thought she was trading up, had been outplayed. Her hands balled into fists. And the worst part? When I realized it wasn't going to last, I looked around and saw I had nothing. No one. Then she glanced at me, desperation flickering in her eyes. "You moved on so quickly. It felt like I never even mattered to you." I couldn't help myself. I laughed, a deep, genuine laugh. "Angela," I said, shaking my head slowly. "You didn't." Her face drained of color. That was when the truth hit her. She had always thought she held some kind of power over me. That no matter what, a part of me would always want her back. But the reality was, I had emotionally checked out long before she did. She just never saw it. She sat frozen, stunned by the truth settling in like a heavy fog. The woman who once thought she controlled everything now looked completely unmoored. She wasn't steering the ship anymore. In fact, she never had. And the hardest pill for her to swallow? She understood that now. For the first time, there was no escape route. No safety net. The man she left me for had discarded her the moment she became inconvenient. And now here she was, hoping the person she'd cast aside would still be willing to pick up the pieces. But I wasn't. She stared at the floor, gripping the edge of her sweater tightly. "I know I made a mess of everything," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve anything from you, not after what I did." I said nothing. Let the silence speak for itself. Let her sit in the ruins of her own making. Her eyes slowly met mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something new: fear. Not fear of harm, but the kind that comes from realizing you've made a mistake too big to fix. "I miss you," she murmured, her voice breaking. "I miss what we had." I laughed again, a full, honest laugh. "Angela," I said, shaking my head slowly. "There's no we. Not anymore." She recoiled, as if I had slapped her. She hadn't expected finality. She thought there might still be a chance. But the panic in her eyes told me she finally saw it. This wasn't a game, and I wasn't playing. I was truly, undeniably done. She had no place left to go. Her final desperate attempt. She was clearly scrambling now, trying to find any way to undo the damage she had caused. And then, unexpectedly, she did something I hadn't anticipated. She reached out and took my hand. This was Angela, the same woman who had spent years making me feel like I was in the way, the one who had walked out on me without a second thought. And now she was holding my hand as if that simple gesture could fix everything between us. I didn't pull away. I just looked at her. You don't have to forgive me, she whispered, barely audible. But maybe we could try again. Maybe we could start over. I tilted my head, repeating her words in disbelief. Start over. She nodded eagerly, as if she had just convinced herself that starting over was something we could actually do. We were great together once, weren't we? Maybe if we just... No. That single word shattered whatever fragile hope she had left. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something more, but no words came out. She blinked rapidly, clearly trying to process what was happening. I leaned in just a bit, making sure she couldn't misinterpret my words. Angela, I spent years feeling like I was never enough. Like everything I did was pointless. You left because you thought there was something better out there. That was your choice. Her grip on my hand tightened, her throat working hard as she tried to swallow the emotions building up. I know, but I cut her off before she could say more. You don't get to rewrite what happened. You can't just disappear, decide you made a mistake, and then come back like nothing matters. Tears started to well up in her eyes. But I love you. I gave a small, bitter smile. No, you don't. What you miss is having someone who truly cared. And then I pulled my hand away. That was the moment she crumbled. Right there, in the living room where so many arguments had happened, the same room where she used to have all the power, Angela fell apart. She had always carried herself like she was untouchable, like she could walk away, and the world would just fall in line. But not this time. Not with me. And I felt nothing. It wasn't my responsibility to pick up her pieces anymore, and I wasn't about to let her lay them at my feet. She didn't leave immediately. She just sat there, her gaze fixed on the floor, her breathing shallow and uneven. Neither of us spoke for a long while. My words were still settling in, and I could see her wrestling with the truth she didn't want to face. For so long, she thought she had ended things on her terms, that the divorce was her decision. But now she was realizing that I had already moved on, and there was no undoing that. Eventually, she whispered, I don't know what to do. And for once, I knew she wasn't manipulating me. It wasn't an act. It was real. Angela had always been the kind of person who kept a backup plan ready, someone who could find a way out no matter the mess. But this time was different. She had burned a bridge, thinking she could always rebuild it. Now she was standing there, watching it fall apart. I sighed and leaned back on the couch, still watching her. You should go. Her head jerked up. What? I motioned toward the door. Angela, we've said everything that needed to be said. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Tears started to form again, but I didn't react. I had spent years trying to make her happy, trying to be the partner she said she wanted. And in return, I got an empty marriage with a partner ready to abandon it all without hesitation. So no, I wasn't going to comfort her now. She slowly got up, her legs shaky. So that's it? You're just done. I gave her a tilted look and a faint, sorrowful smile. Angela, I was done the moment you walked out that door. Her expression crumbled. I had never seen her so completely lost, but I wasn't going to find her way for her. I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it wide. Goodbye, Angela. She stood there for a second, frozen. Then she exhaled shakily and walked past me, stepping out into the night. On the porch, she paused, as if she was considering turning around, thinking there might still be a chance to change my mind. But then she looked into my face and saw nothing. No hesitation, no flicker of doubt. And she knew then that she had already lost. Without a word, she turned and walked away. I closed the door and locked it. For the first time in many years, I felt something I hadn't felt before, complete and undeniable freedom. The silence that followed her departure was different from the silence I had known before. It wasn't suffocating or crushing. It was peaceful. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the stillness, the absence of constant conflict, and the release from that unrelenting sense of inadequacy. And for the first time in years, I smiled. A real smile. One that came from deep within, full of relief and release. Angela was gone, and this time for good. And I didn't feel a trace of sadness. Not even a little bit. The next few days felt like the start of a new chapter. There was no more questioning myself. No more waiting for the sound of the door and dreading what mood she might bring with her. I was no longer playing a supporting role in my own life. I was finally free. I began focusing on myself in ways I hadn't before. The gym became more than just a distraction. It became a place where I started to rebuild myself. I reached out to friends I hadn't seen in ages, and I began embracing opportunities I'd always avoided. I even treated myself to a solo weekend getaway, something Angela would have found ridiculous. But to my surprise, it turned out to be one of the best experiences of my life. Then, a few weeks later, an unexpected message popped up on my phone from a number I didn't recognize. It read, "I messed up. I wish I could take it all back. Angela." Without a second thought, I deleted the message, put my phone down, and carried on with my day. Because for the first time in what felt like forever, I had finally found happiness.